Hello and welcome. This is Cujo Sound and I'm Bjørn Jacobsen. This is the Wise series and today's episode is going to be about RTPCs and blend containers. The reason why these two are put together is simply because RTPCs and blend containers, they work very much together. So let's take a look at the stuff we did before. We have the footsteps, which use a switch container like this. And what we're going to do now is that we are going to have a blend container do the switching for us if we have an RTPC. We're still going to have only one event, so check out how this works. Over in game syncs, we still have over here game parameters, and in the default work unit you can create a new parameter. This one we're going to call it player movement speed. So let's say we have a character and our game will feed us the parameter information of how fast is our character moving. Like, let's say 0 is super stealthy and we can move at a maximum of, let's say, 10 meters per second. Yeah, something like that. And the default value will be somewhere in between. Let's do that. Now, over here in our default work unit, as you remember from the previous episode, we have running and walking and we have two materials. So we're going to be combining all this together and see what we can do about it. Let's create a new blend container. And this blend container here, we're going to be calling it player movement. And let's just let's do only our concrete movement to begin with. If you copy it into the blend container, now if we press play on our blend container now, it blends between everything that is underneath it in the hierarchy. So if we press play now, it should play both of these. And it does. Now, we don't want that. We want it to blend smoothly between these, dependent on our player movement speed over here. So what we're going to do is that we are going to create a blend track. You click blend track here in the properties, and this window will pop up and you can say new blend track. Let's call this one step blender. Good. The step blender blend track will pop up down here on the list of blend tracks, just like it did with the switch containers and the sequencer and the other things that we worked with. So now we're going to be copying boots over here and boots run. Now if we here in our player movement say edit blend tracks, you will see that we now still have this blend track here, which is our step blender, but let's call it Crossfade and do that. Select the parameter here, the one that we want. Game parameters, default work unit, this is where we put it. And now you will see that this is a meter which can, in the game, it will dynamically move up and down depending on how fast our character is moving. So let's start by this this boots regular walking and running over here. Just as before, let's go to our event, play footsteps, and make sure that it plays the blend container instead. So right now it's playing walking, I suppose. Down here, just as we did before with the switches where we could manually set our switches down here, we can now set our RTPC and the value there. So let's lock this. And once this goes above 5, it should start playing the running sound, the running sample, because we over here in our blend track have told it to change. Now you can see while I'm changing the meter here, it also changes the parameter down here. So no need to click back and forth down here. We can, it's a little easier to move this and have a visual representation. So here, this is running, and this here's walking. Now, let's try this again and create a blend container, which we will call player movement 2. No, player movement switch. Let's do that. And in our event, we make sure that it plays the new one here. And let's copy our 2 different materials here. So this here is running and this here is walking. Copy those down into our player movement switch. It just changed here because the order of things, like when you create a new folder, it's not always in the correct position alphabetically, but that changes once you change something. So our player movement switch here has walking and running here. And these are, because we copied and pasted them, able to, with our switch, to decipher between, are we walking on metal or are we running on metal or concrete, whatever we want. So player movement switch, create a blend track, new blend track, crossfade, game parameters, default work unit, player movement speed, and out here we drag, let's start by walking, and then running. And in our player movement switch, we go back into the blend container. And you can even crossfade them like this, but we don't want that. So if you don't want to do it on by eye coordination, you can just type in here when it should start and when it should stop. So right now, it still plays running and walking. But if we down here in our event say that we want to take a look at the switches, so this is now concrete, and now it's metal because we're changing the switch. And it still does that, and it still works inside the blend container. So the blend container can do this for us. Now, let's try to make a slightly more sophisticated move on this, because we're going to be using all sorts of let's say, a stealthy and a sprinting type of movement as well. We have 2 ways of doing this, and we're going to be looking at both the methods. Also, because it's a nice way of editing files. One of them is really dependency heavy, so it's not necessarily recommended, but we can take a look at it. So we have running and walking now, which switches between metal and concrete. We then want, I have my concrete sneaking and sprinting sounds here, and these are long files. So let's try in here and copy walking out like this. We'll make one called sneak, and we'll make one called sprint. And inside here we delete these. Like that. Good. So now we have running, metal, and concrete, and we have walking, but no sneak and no sprint. Now we're going to be creating our concrete sneak in here. So in our boots folder here, let's copy the whole file of the sneaking into here. There we go. As you can see, this is a long file, a very, very long file, which is different from the other ones that we had. So let's, if we copy this out, this one, there are 7 variations in this one, which is different from the other ones. But let's take a look at this here. So this here's our first sneak. We can then move the boundaries like this, and then on the next one we do the next step here. Here we go. So we need a random container for all these. So now we have 7 variations of heavy boots sneak which all derive from the same long file, but we have edited them in Wwise like this. This is somewhat, yes and no, a smart way to do things, because sometimes it's nice to have everything like this bounced into one file and then you can edit it out like this. But the problem becomes that if you edit in any way, edit the source material of this file, you break all these variations and then you need to redo them. So it's not necessarily something that I would do. In here, let's easily create a random container, and we'll call it Sneak Concrete. If I could spell concrete, there we go. Inside it, there are 7 variations, so let's shuffle and say 4. So that's our Sneak Concrete. In our boots folder here, we have metal sneak as well. And I have, just like I did with all the other ones, we have 7 variations. I don't know why there's 7 instead of 8, but we can now say metal sneak and drag the whole folder in onto sneak and say that we want this to be a random container and import. There you go. Here we go. So here's our Sneak Concrete. Previously it was actually playing the wrong sound because we had locked the event, but let's not get confused about that. Here we have Sneak Concrete. Here we have Sneak Metal. And we have our switch container here. As you can see, if I spam the space button to press play, nothing happens here. But that's because we need to drag these 2 in here so that it knows that whenever the switch is active, which one to play. So now it's playing metal. And now it's playing concrete. Let's do that again with a sprint file. Now, metal sprint. Drag and drop into here. Random container. There you go. These are my metal sprint files. Good. And we want to do the same thing with all my sprint files from the concrete one, which were still into one file, so we're going to be editing those. So right click, create a random container, and we will call it concrete sprint. And inside there we copy one file. There we go. We make sure that there are 7 copies of it, and then we edit. Here's 1. And here's 2. 3. And 4. And 5. For some reason, I think there was actually 8 of these. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There is actually 8 variations of these. So let's copy the last one as well and say that this is variation 8. So now, in our sprint, just as before, we copy metal sprint over here and concrete sprint over there. We make sure that our play event here plays the movement switch. But now we need to alter something in the blend container because we now have sneak and sprint, which is not over here in the blend track. So let's say sneak and sprint. In our blend container here, we edit the blend track. And let's say we want sneaking to be all the way to the left. Oh, we can't do that because we need to change the order here. There we go. Sneak, walk, run, and sprint. Good. Good. Sneak, walk, run, and sprint. Now, let's say that if we're moving with a speed between 0 and 2.5 meters per second, then it plays this one. Let's say 2.5. And this one here also goes from 2.5 to, let's say, 6. You can see you can crossfade between these. That's a different way of doing it. We can do that if you have multiple tracks. But let's just, to begin with, we're just going to do it like this. So this one starts at 6 and it goes all the way to 8. And our sprinting one will then go from 8 to 10. So now we have, as you can see here, we have concrete. Let's lock the event here so that it doesn't mess anything up. Now we are sneaking. The parameter is being fed from our game, how fast our player is moving. So now we can blend between all these. And now we're walking. And whoa, suddenly we're stepping on metal. And now we're back on concrete. And we start running. We can even go to sprinting. Like that. Now, the cool part is, what if these needs to be mixed kind of differently, or you want the pitch to be changed or anything like that? You can, in your blend container over here, say voice volume, and you want it to be controlled by, it could be the same parameter. So this here is now our volume control meter. So our parameter. And let's say we want our sprinting to be slightly louder when you're sprinting. This is 6 decibels. It's we can even say that we want it linear, so you can type in the numbers that you want here exactly on how many decibels you want it. But in this case, because the window is so small, it can be kind of nice. Have a look at it like this. So let's say here that we want it to be 6 decibels louder. This is sprinting in the beginning. And this is sprinting 6 decibels louder. Let's say we want walking to be very silent when you're moving at this speed here. If you want that, then you can alter it like this. You can also make it can get really loud. It goes all the way up to 200 dB. So watch your ears if you do that. Anyway, this is one way to do that. Let's say we also want the voice pitch to be altered by the same parameter. And we don't want to watch, we only want to see this one. So maybe because if you use the same assets for, let's say, running and sprinting, you could do that. But you then want sprinting to be faster. And you can, let's say we put it a little bit down here. In that way, we have full control and we blend between these. And this is how a blend container would work if it came to footsteps. In terms of that we use the blend container to tell us, because of an Rtpc value, are we sneaking, walking, running, or sprinting? It's not the same as what we did up here in our switch container, where we had a switch tell us if we are running or walking or sneaking or sprinting. But we're still only having one event, because one event can do this. In the game code, you or the programmer can make sure that all these switches are set whenever this event is called to the correct game object. So you only need one event to do this. I'm not saying that one event is the best solution. You can have thousands of events if you want that, and then get rid of the switch container, because then you can just have these random containers in the hierarchy, and that's also a smart way of doing it. But that's how RTPCs work, and that's how RTPCs work, especially combined with blend containers when it comes to the 99 ways to footsteps. I hope you enjoyed this video and learned a lot about it. If you have any questions, feel free to pop them up in the comments below, or you can even send me an email if you want at b@cujo.dk. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and sign up on Patreon if you like. If you want to know more about what's going on, then be sure to subscribe everywhere you can. And hopefully you have been inspired and you will learn something. See you next time.